Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We are ready to get started with the COSIN webinar on the Trusted Learning Environment program. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to have you all with us. Just a note about COSIN, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a member-based professional association for district technology leaders. We provide a variety of resources to support your work in managing your technology needs, community building, and your leadership. I want to thank our variety of corporate partners who helped make this webinar series possible. And without further ado, we'd like to dig in. Start by introducing myself. I'm your host today. I'm Lynette Attai. I am the project director for COSIN's Privacy Initiative and Trusted Learning Environment program. I'm also the founder of a global compliance consulting firm, Playwell LLC, where I advise organizations, educators, lawmakers, and policy influencers, serving as virtual chief privacy officer and data protection officer to certain clients, and I often speak nationally on data privacy matters. I'm a member of the Rutgers Center for Innovation Cybersecurity Advisory Board and author of the book Student Data Privacy, Building a School Compliance Program. I'm honored today to be joined by Serena Sachs and Brian Westerman. Serena Sachs is the Chief Information from Fulton County Schools, TLE Seal recipient, Fulton County Schools. Serena has been a transformational IT and business leader for over 30 years at IBM, Walt Disney World, Wyndham, HD Supply, Florida Virtual School, and now Fulton County. Serena is passionate about advancing women in technology and leveraging technology to help each student reach their potential through personalized learning. She's certified in program management, Six Sigma, and enterprise governance. She earned her BA and MS in accelerated program at SUNY Stony Brook, graduating Phi Beta Kappa and summa cum laude. In 2015, she was named Woman of the Year by the Technology Association of Georgia. And in 2015, she was named Woman of the Year by the Technology Association of Georgia. And in 2017, she was awarded the Georgia Nonprofit Sector CIO of the Year. Also joining us today is Brian Westerman. Brian is the Student Data Privacy Officer for Denver Public Schools, also a TLE Seal recipient. Brian provides district-wide leadership as the Student Data Privacy Officer in collection, sharing, and management of student data used for school, district, state, and federal purposes. He also provides leadership in the development, implementation, training, and monitoring of district-wide student data privacy policies and related processes, ensuring compliance with all the statutory requirements, including federal and state requirements. And Brian provides representation and advocacy for district leaders, for district interests on statewide committees and organizations, such as Colorado Department of Education and Colorado legislative initiatives. So we've got a great group for you today, I hope, but enough about us. Let's get started. We'd like to learn about you. So if you could, help us by answering a couple of quick poll questions. We'd first like to know, what do you hope to learn from today's webinar? Are you new to the TLE Seal program and just want to learn the basics? Are you considering applying and looking to better understand how going through the process might help benefit your district? Or are you working on the application and are looking for some tips for success? Here's something. And if you could, take a few minutes to respond. And when you're done, we have one more poll question for you. So it looks like most of you are here considering applying and are looking to better understand how this would benefit your district. However, we certainly have quite a few of you who are here to learn the basics and some are looking for tips. Luckily, we're going to try to answer all of these questions for you today. And we will certainly give some focus on how the process will better support and benefit your district.
Are you on the webinar? Yeah, I'm just listening. It's fading in and out. Oh.
So we have one more poll question for you. We want to understand how your district is doing. These survey questions are anonymous, so please just give us an answer. How would you rate your district's privacy expertise? Do you have a good grasp of the requirements? Are you just getting started, or do you have a mature program but are just looking for, understanding that there's always room to improvement and are looking to elevate your practices? If you could give us some answers to that, it'll help us also to better tailor the information that we provide to you today. So it looks like we've got, again, a nice range, but it looks like most of us are feeling pretty good about the basics and are looking to expand our knowledge, and we will, so we'll certainly tailor our comments accordingly for the group. All right, so now that we've gotten that business out of the way, let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about the Trusted Learning Environment program. Just start with the basics. This was a program that was developed 2 years ago. It is the Trusted Learning Environment. It is a SEAL program, and the SEAL is intended to be a mark of distinction for school systems, indicating that they've taken measurable, defined, and publicly available steps to protect the privacy of student data. The program was created by COSIN in partnership with 28 school system leaders, including, as well as some lead organizations, including our lead partners, AASA, ASBO, and ASCD. And it's been supported by a wide variety of organizations that operate in different areas of state and local school support. And really, we describe it as a program that was developed by school system leaders for school system leaders. And the impetus behind it was in large part the sort of growing concerns that we had around technology use in school systems. And we wanted to make sure that we understood from school systems what were the tangible steps that you could take to build and improve on your privacy practices. The requirements of the TLE program are available publicly. And so it is meant as a signal of your commitment and your maturity to the community in a way that's very transparent, in a way that your community can see and digest and understand. Now, I often talk about the TLE Seal program as being a program that was built to help to alleviate the growing concerns around data privacy and security that existed among parents, parent advocates, legislators, and other stakeholders, and the drive among school systems to modernize and build those 21st century technology-enabled classrooms and take better advantage of the power that data has to help us personalize learning and better inform instruction. But I'd love to have, ask Serena and Brian. Maybe Serena, we'll start with you. Why did you decide at Fulton to apply for the TLE Seal program? What was the impetus and what did you feel was important about it?
So we were rolling out one-to-one for grade 6 to 12 in classroom sets for elementary school kids. And we knew there was inherent risk in letting students take home their devices. And to counteract that, we made digital citizenship and data privacy a very apparent priority with the board, with the staff, with the leadership. And so when we keep in touch with COSIN, so when the TLE Seal program became available, we wanted to be able to show our parents, our board, our community that it is a priority. And that's why we went through this program. We look at an audit or this kind of evaluation as an opportunity to learn and improve, but it also is a stamp of approval from a trusted organization that we proudly display on our website, and we were recognized by the board for it. So it's very important in terms of communicating with parents. Before we had this, all we had is, your typical IT audits that don't get into the detail that a K-12 questionnaire would get into. And frankly, we had parents raising concerns. We have folks and parents in the district that are very technical, and they wanted to know what we were doing to keep their kids safe, and their data safe. So I don't get those calls anymore.
That's great. That's great to know. Brian, what about you? What was the Denver's path to deciding to apply for the TLE Seal? What was the driving force there?
Awesome. So yeah, here in Denver Public Schools, we in Colorado have had some legislature pass in the last few years regarding student data privacy. And even before that, we operate as a very decentralized district where schools have a lot of autonomy and can really go out and purchase educational technology to suit their needs. And we recognize that as that was occurring, we really needed some method of kind of tracking and keeping all of that accounted for. And we wanted something that was essentially an industry standard or industry best practice that we could kind of benchmark against to figure out how we were doing in relation to other districts at the national level, because some of the various laws like FERPA and COPPA are a little hard to interpret in terms of the specifics. So we originally applied for the TLE Seal, and we're proud to be members of the very first cohort, actually, of TLE Seal recipients. And as Serena said, really have looked at that as kind of a benchmark within the community as well to say, here are the steps that we are doing. As you said, Lynette, it is publicly available what the criteria is for application, and being able to have that conversation with parents and our community around what we're doing to keep our educational spaces safe for their students digitally is a really important thing for us.
Thanks. That's very helpful. And I know, Brian and Serena, you're both going to talk a little bit about your path. Brian, I know Denver's been on took a long path to getting TLE ready. They were very thoughtful about improving their data practices. And I wonder if you could just touch on that a little bit briefly for us, because you've done quite a bit of work over the years to build up a privacy program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it all started, a lot of it for us, I think, was just really wanting to do the best that we could and not really being as sure of what that was. As I mentioned, our state law passed in August of 2016 and went into full effect about a year ago at the end of 2017. But we've been looking at this since as early as 2014, really around what can we do digitally, what can we do around industry best practice, like I said. And so the reason we kind of took a longer path is because we wanted to be really intentional about what it was that we were adopting as far as educational technology software, and also how we were able to deliver that message around public transparency. For those that are familiar with our state law, that's one of the big changes that it makes to FERPA and some of those others is the requirement of districts to make all contracts and data sharing agreements publicly available. And so in doing so, we really wanted to make sure that we weren't just making those available, but also going above and beyond to ensure that we could adhere to all of the various components within those.
That's great. Thank you. I talk about the TLE Seal program. The TLE Seal program is not a measure of legal compliance, but it assumes that you are managing your legal compliance and that you're going above and beyond the letter of the law and really embracing the spirit of the law and a holistic approach to data privacy practices, as well as then committing to ongoing improvement. We know that privacy is a discipline, a function that is never quite done, but we hope to continuously mitigate risk. And so what the TLE application requires is that you provide an explanation of how you are meeting each of the 25 specific practice items, but then also examples of evidence that you might provide to demonstrate your explanation, to show us, for example, that you do have a policy in place and here's what the policy looks like so that we can see how comprehensive the policy is, if you're keeping it up to date, and really illustrate the way the practices come to life in your district. And it's a holistic approach, as I mentioned, covering 5 key areas. One is leadership. How is your district leadership? How fluent are they in data privacy? How are they supporting data privacy work across the district? How are you, as Brian mentioned, dealing with technology providers, contracting with technology providers, and ensuring that the technology that you bring into your district meets the privacy requirements and security requirements to protect student data? How are you protecting the security of the data, both in the cloud, when it's sent to technology providers, data on paper, all media formats? How is that considered? And how are you keeping your security standards up to date? How are you training your employees, all of your stakeholders, all of your employees, on the importance of maintaining the privacy of student data and what that means? What are the behaviors that they need to engage in order to do that work? As well as transparency in the classroom. How are your teachers empowered and enabled to have the thoughtful discussions with parents about how you're protecting student data privacy when bringing technology into the classroom? And how are they modeling good behavior, good privacy behavior in the classroom with their students? Now, it's a lot to cover, and I wonder, Serena, if you could help us understand what did preparing for all of this look like in your district? You mentioned that you really made a point of highlighting the priority of privacy in your district. How did that come about? How did you do that work? It's a common question I get asked. I wonder if you could talk us through it.
Sure. So I like this slide because it really is a holistic approach. We have everything from a board policy that we changed to make sure it said responsible use. So we couldn't list everything that you could or couldn't do. People have to use thoughtfulness. And when I say people, I mean everyone, students, parents, teachers, staff. So responsible use of the network and the devices is thoughtful use. And so we spell out, you know, the values and the guidelines, but it's a very broad definition. So that was followed up with mandatory employee training on safety, digital, cybersecurity, safety awareness, and people have to sign off on that every single year. And then in addition, as I mentioned, we use the common sense for digital citizenship, so that the teachers and the students and the parents are well aware of how they need to behave online. And we have many, many layers of security to protect the data. So it's a combination of protecting students, protecting the data, and most breaches, most issues are caused by individuals, by social engineering. So we want to continue to train our staff to actually test them. We randomly test, and if they fail the test, they're invited to watch a video and recertify themselves. And I just want to mention we have 100% of our schools have digital citizenship training, and they can't take home the devices until the parents and the students have signed off on that. So that's a big deal. But it's all of the layers of security, both tools and monitoring and scanning, as well as the education process. It's and it is an ongoing job. Security continually changes, and so how we combat it has to continually evolve to meet the threats. It is holistic. I like the slide, and management, leadership, everybody has to get it. There's always this balance between convenience and security, and every district kind of has to find their right place on that continuum. We can't make it so inconvenient that they circumvent the security, but we have to educate them as to why this might be a little bit less convenient because it's secure. And that's a constant balancing act. So hope that helps.
Absolutely. And Brian, can you take us through, Denver is a really interesting district model in that you do allow a good deal of autonomy for your schools. How did preparing and wrangling all of the stakeholders in Denver to prepare for the TLE application, what did that look like for you?
It's a great question, and I think for us, when we approach everything through the lens of really empowering schools to be autonomous and innovative in the classroom, I mean, that's a holistic approach on our side that kind of frames that discussion in any space, whether it's data privacy, curriculum adoption, assessment, that sort of thing. And so understanding that our schools are really the units of change here in Denver Public Schools and doing everything we can centrally to support that work has been a really key component for us. That said, as we approached the TLE Seal and all of the work that we needed to do around that, we were very much thinking around how can we best ensure that when we embrace this model of flexibilities, that we are also legally compliant, as you mentioned a slide ago, Lynette. And so I think that was really the focus that we started out on, was how can we ensure that we are doing what we need to do under federal and state law while also securing all of our various environments for our students, including environments that we may not have adopted yet that school leaders may discover through that process. So I mean, that has been a real key focus of us, and I will share with the group, we just completed our TLE Seal renewal process and recertified, which was an exciting opportunity here as well in Denver. And one of the things that COSIN's now doing around that is providing benchmarks around those 5 categories with how the district is doing in relation to other TLE Seal applicants and recipients. And so it's really fascinating for us to kind of get a deeper look into the areas that we're maybe doing really well, and then some of the areas where we could still work to improve. And so within that, we were able to identify that around professional development in the classroom, we could continue to do a better job with our outreach and our conversations around student data privacy to make sure that we're doing all the right things. I really appreciate, Serena, that you addressed digital citizenship, because I think that's kind of the missing piece of all of the student data privacy puzzle. Is how do we engage students and their families to ensure that they're being thoughtful and safe when interacting with technology, both within the classroom and also at home or in other environments that they might find themselves in. So definitely that holistic approach really resonates with us and is something that we've taken from step 1 and moved forward with.
Great, thank you so much for that. And I think you both hit on an interesting point and something that many districts struggle with, which is the places that tend to be particularly challenging are classroom practices, but also sometimes leadership practices. And we have a great question from one of our listeners, which is, who was included in the leadership team who worked through the TLE application? If one of you wants to help us understand what were the roles that were involved in working through the application.
This is
Serena, should we start with you?
Yeah, this is Serena. So we had a cross-section of roles across the district, including instructional technology, of course, technology, professional development, human resources, and I'm looking to Derek. Anyone else?
Yeah, and just the rest of the technology.
School leadership. We have a group called the Vanguards, and they're kind of the technology leaders in every school. There's 1 to 4 of them per school, and we always include them when we are thinking about doing something new, or we want to make sure that it's going to resonate and work well at the school level. So that gives us a pool of folks to work with, at the school level and the classroom level. They're teachers usually, and they mentor other teachers in the technology field. So that's a specific answer, who we worked with. I did, and I don't know if this is the right place, but before I forget, I wanted to talk about, because Lynette, you talked about how in the classroom, and Brian, you talked about this too, kind of the schools being the Wild West, and we certainly had that issue too. Both free and low-cost apps and digital tools are so available to teachers. They go to conferences, they come home. Our director of information security always sees, the security blip up after teachers have gone to conferences. They take home viruses in these tools. So that's a big part of wrangling that mindset and what they do. And one of the things a couple things we did is we created an online digital marketplace that's indexed by grade, level, by subject matter, and standards, so that teachers can build lesson plans and they can use these tools without having to go out to the Wild West of the Google, the internet, and just pick up anything. These tools have been certified. The vendors have signed a boilerplate agreeing to data privacy that the district requires. They've been vetted from an academic efficacy standpoint, and then they've also been vetted from a technology support vantage point. So we've tried to solve teachers' problems in a way that supports the objectives of the district, including privacy.
Thank you for that. And Brian, I know that Denver Public Schools has a very robust technology vetting process as well. Could you talk us through how you got started with that? It's always kind of we look at districts that have these programs with a lot of admiration because we know how hard it is to get that started. It can be a bit painful. What did that look like in Denver?
Phenomenal question, and I appreciate, Serena, you talking about the Wild West, because that's certainly how sometimes educational technology can feel. I just posted a link in the chat to everyone to our academic technology menu. And so this has really been kind of the one consolidated resource that we have within the district to really try to track and manage a lot of these different types of technology adoptions, integrations, and various things. And please feel free to look that over. You're also welcome to reach out to me if you have any comments in particular regarding the ATM. It's something that we're certainly very proud of here and kind of gives an overview into some of the things that we do around data privacy and really just technology integration and adoption in general. So that said, one of the main things that we've really had to do is make sure that centrally the teams that are engaging with schools, academics, curriculum, DOTS, we actually have an educational technology department that's separate from our IT program, that all of these various teams come together and really review and vet some of the applications that schools are wanting to use, especially when those are being used across multiple schools or potentially impacting multiple students. So we really work hard to have a cross-functional committee review these applications and provide recommendations and approvals. And if you go through our website and kind of look at the various resources there, you'll see that there are composite scores, and then there are also unique areas where different departments have kind of weighed in and made their recommendations. So while we may have FERPA approval, for example, which is my category where we have a data sharing agreement, maybe that's not the best choice for curriculum because they don't differentiate for English language learning students. So our C&I team, our curriculum instruction, would be able to go in there and make that note and say this might be a great resource for some students but not all. And so we really try to increase that transparency with our schools around what it is that they might choose to buy and to make sure that they're making the best decisions possible while also leveraging economies of scale. You mentioned one thing a moment ago, Serena, around free applications or low-cost applications, and I do have to give a shout-out to the last year COSIN conference because someone, and I forget her name, and I apologize for that, but she had a comment that was just so funny, where she said, yes, it's a free app in the sense that it's free like a puppy, right? So the cost up front might be nothing, but down the road, what are you really paying in terms of vet care and food bills and all that sort of stuff? And anytime a teacher comes and says, well, it's a free app, I don't need to worry about student data privacy, right? It's a great opportunity for us to have a conversation, a training opportunity really, to help them understand that just because it might be free or easy to use doesn't mean there's not a risk being posed to students there. So does that answer your question, Lynette?
That's fantastic, and I love the analogy to a puppy. Yes, but it's all good until they chew up your shoes. And I really appreciate the holistic approach. The TLE Seal encourages and requires a holistic approach to student data privacy, and I really appreciate how you take a holistic approach to assessing technology. We are obviously focused on the privacy aspect of it, but there needs to be, of course, a good curriculum need, requirement, justification for the technology as well. So fantastic, and I hope that everyone will take a look at the work that Denver and Fulton have done around this, because I know it is a common pain point for many districts and a common challenge. I want to mention, we've had this slide up of the TLE Seal recipients, and for those of you whose district maybe doesn't look like a Denver or a Fulton, know that these TLE Seal recipients represent a real diverse cross-section of districts across the country. They are large, they are medium, they're small districts. They are in urban areas, rural, suburban. Some of them are very well resourced, some of them are very poorly resourced. So we've seen districts of all shapes and sizes be able to leverage the TLE program to assess and better understand how they're doing around privacy and get on a path to improve practices. And I'm going to show you an example in a little bit of that benchmarking report that Brian mentioned that comes via going through the application process. I often say that there tends to be no such thing as a positive story about data privacy these days. And the exception to that rule is the TLE program. It has been met with universal acclaim with national and local press. Every district that has been successfully awarded the seal has been the recipient of very positive local press. But more than that, it really helps to, part of the intention, part of the benefit of going through the program is to help take the fear out of the equation in your school or district with parents and parent advocates who are concerned about technology use, concerned about data privacy when you're sharing data with technology providers. Brian, maybe we can start with you. Could you talk about some of the benefits of the program, either internally with your teams or with your relationships with your community for Denver? And then Serena, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Sure thing. And so, I think personally that there's great value in standardization and working around a standard. And I think that that's what the TLE Seal really provides. One of the things that we've done in the state of Colorado that has just been exceptional in many ways is all of the districts have kind of worked together to adopt a standardized data sharing agreement template that we use with the vendors that we all do business with. Now, of course, that's taken on, its unique form for each district as needed, but sort of the skeleton or the framework of the document has remained largely the same. And I find that that standardized approach has just helped so much in terms of contract negotiations with various vendors when, we'll enter into business with them and they'll say, well, here's, a data sharing agreement we did with another district in Colorado. Does this work? And that really accelerates the process. So that analogy I think is relevant here because I think the TLE Seal does that just on another level around here is the standard that we have met nationally, and this is kind of the minimum point of entry if it's a vendor, for example, that we're going to need you to be able to adhere and comply and meet us where we're at in doing this work. And I think it just really serves to elevate the conversation for all that are involved. We've had vendors that'll come back after reviewing our data sharing agreement and sort of some of our requirements that we've used here in the district, and they'll say, we don't meet this standard yet, but we want to, and we want to work on this with you now. So we'd like to request a 3-month period of time, to make the changes that are here according to, your environment and your agreement, and really come back to you with a comprehensive set of changes that will allow us to meet these requirements. And so I see that conversation, it's not just beneficial for us in the district, but it's also beneficial as we're doing work with actual vendors for technology adoptions.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Serena, what can you share about how Fulton has benefited or some benefits that you might share with the group here about going through the TLE program? And Serena, I think we might need to unmute you.
Sorry, it was kind of going back and forth. I'm unmuted now, right? Can you hear me?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. I was saying I agree with what Brian was saying, and I just want to highlight one of the points I think he's making, but I want to kind of bold it out, is there's kind of a camaraderie in having these standards defined and working across districts and say, well, how did you do this? This webinar, I mean, we're not competitive. We're trying to share and kind of, the tide lifts all boats and the high tide. So, we can help each other by having some standards. We can help each other in how we met them. But I also want to take a step back. If we think back 5 years ago or so, most school rooms, most classrooms didn't have much technology. There was very little Wi-Fi. It was expensive. And, you might have a couple of big desktops in the back that when the kid was finished with their schoolwork, they could go back and play on it. In the last 5 years, most districts have evolved to the point where there is significant Wi-Fi in the classrooms. Students either bring their own technology or the districts are providing them. And so it's been like a greenfield in terms of technology, and now it's been an explosion So there's so much technology, which in turn creates a lot of risk. So having the TLE kind of spell out specifically for K-12. I worked in corporations for 25 years, and we thought the firewall was keeping out the bad guys. At a school district, we have 100,000 kids inside the firewall that are creative and clever and like to show off. So how do you manage that security risk? It's very different than a corporation. So having a set of standards that is very specific to K-12 is important. And then, just to full circle it, then we can share best practices because we're not competitive, and we can work with each other and build on each other's shoulders. So, this has been a very positive experience, and we're happy to share. We're happy to help others, and we just want to continue to make each other better because we're far from done ourselves.
That's great, and we will we'll talk a little bit about some of the collaborative efforts and opportunities that exist around TLE in just a bit. I want to direct everyone to trustedlearning.org. If you've not been there already, on the website, you will find a link to the application that you can download and work through on paper. Get all of those publicly available frameworks are there. There is a handbook available to help you understand how to go through the application, how to project manage it, as well as some tips and tricks, some common pitfalls to avoid. And in addition, we've, in the spirit of sharing, we've worked with all of our TLE Seal recipients to come up with examples of evidence that they've used in their successful applications that you can model. So if you're looking at the application and aren't sure what sort of documentation might be sufficient for a particular practice area, we have some examples there for you. And a variety of other resources, just a few of which I want to touch on. But Brian, I wonder if you could help us understand, for Denver going through this, we've certainly talked a lot about the successes for Denver and Fulton, but where did you find some challenges in going through the application? I'm sure we all have some, and great learning experience, I think, in understanding what are the areas where for Denver there was work to do, or just challenges in getting people in alignment?
Absolutely. And so I will say for the group here, since I know a number of people during the poll had kind of indicated they might be considering the TLE Seal, the initial application process was definitely very intensive in comparison to the renewal. So, when we first sat down to look at that and go through that, all of the different areas and all of the evidence that was required, we recognized that it was going to be, a substantial effort to kind of get that done. That said, we also recognized that there was a number of gaps that we had, and that in doing the process, not even looking at the seal, but just walking through that kind of as a self-audit, there was a great opportunity to sort of shore up some of those vulnerabilities that Serena was talking about, amongst other things. And so we really just tried to kind of, tried to be humble really and look at that and say, there's a lot that we can learn from this. And so this TLE Seal program handbook was a great resource when we first kicked off. I don't believe the examples of evidence existed at that time, but we sure made a point to track all of that. We had kind of an internal spreadsheet we were doing where we were providing, our justifications and our evidence for each section. So I think for anybody who's considering getting started, really leveraging these tools around the evidence and, staying organized in that approach. But I would also say the role of leadership, data, superintendents and data privacy, I think it's coming up slide. But that was a really important part for us because I think, anyone that's been involved in any sort of change or project management understands the role of sponsorship. I'm sure the majority of people on this call here can identify that, if you don't have a strong sponsor for a project, it's definitely going to have more challenges than a project where that sponsor is really excellent. And so recognizing early on that we really needed to engage our senior leaders here in the district around student data privacy as something that was, current and future state going to continue evolving, and that was something that they really needed to be on board with, was a pivotal step for us in being able to move a lot of this forward and developing some of the board policies and other more official resources, like Serena had alluded to earlier, that have really helped guide us forward during this time.
Thank you, Brian. Serena, what about you? What was challenging for Fulton?
Well, it's not easy to change behaviors, and especially from a district level when you have 105 schools, to help them understand why they can't just download free apps. I love Brian's analogy of free like a puppy. I've heard that probably half a dozen times lately around here, and I totally relate to it. It's like, free is really not free. So, whether it's at a district level or a school level, there are risks, there are costs to support. And so, change management is always the hardest part. So what I've said to my team when we've had some minor crises, we have never wasted a good crisis to build support and say, this is what happened, this is what we want to do about it, and it's going to cost this amount of money. And that's how we've been able to, knock on wood, avoid larger challenges. So getting that support, getting that kind of burning platform to change sometimes takes, a mini crisis to prevent the bigger crisis. And that's from a buy-in at every level in the district.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And to Brian's point earlier about it being the application being a bit challenging, can be a bit daunting. For some districts, it will take up to 2 years of from when they start to look at the application to when they're ready to apply. And through that process, they are kind of ticking off some of the requirements of the TLE and incorporating those requirements into their daily practices. So for everyone, what I would encourage as a place to start is go to trustedlearning.org/resources and take a look at this. The first module you see on this page, the self-assessment. It should take you about 15 minutes to complete. It's a very simple tool that will allow you to really hone in on your readiness for the TLE application. And if you're not ready, help you really narrow down where you need to focus your energies and your limited resources in order to move the needle on improving the privacy practices in your district. So it's a very simple tool, but we've been told it's extremely useful. So I would encourage doing that. As one of the benefits of applying for the TLE Seal, for every application that's submitted, we provide customized feedback and recommendations for improvement. And Brian alluded to this earlier. So for each application that comes in, we will provide you with feedback that explains how you scored on each of the 25 practice items, as well as what you might do to improve, and refer you to some free resources that can help guide that improvement. We also provide you with this benchmarking report that will show you, it's a visual representation of your score compared to the aggregated score of other TLE Seal recipients. And we do this not only for each of the 5 practice areas, but for each of the 25 requirements of the program, you will see a benchmarking graph. So you will have a very simple way to understand, well, where are we doing well? Where are we kind of not making the mark, and what do we need to do to improve?
I just want to say this is one of the most valuable parts of the program is to get that feedback. You can't look at it as whether you're passing or failing a test. It's help us figure out how to be better wherever we are. So even if you pass, you can always improve. So we really appreciate getting this feedback.
And it's completely confidential. No one knows that you applied except you first. And for those that apply and don't make it the first time around, don't earn the seal first time around, you can reapply without any obligation. We actually provide peer support for those who want to reapply as well. We will set you up with a CTO who's experienced with the TLE to help you to review your reapplication. So you can apply and reapply, and we have more than one TLE Seal recipient who did not make it the first time, but took the feedback, improved, and reapplied. To Serena's point about collaborating and kind of lifting each other up, we've also started working across the states. We found districts kind of coming together. As you'll see from the application, it's not an easy process to go through, but it's made much better when we can go through it together. And so what we started doing is helping to support district cohorts across a variety of states who have come together to work together, crowdsource their knowledge around the TLE, and work together to help each other improve practices, finish the application, and get to a place where they are TLE ready. And you'll see here the states where we currently have cohorts going. And when this happens, when districts are coming together in a particular state, we're able to support at scale. So what we do with these cohorts is we will connect you with a TLE Seal recipient, such as Serena or Brian, or one of our other TLE Seal recipients, to act as a virtual peer mentor for your group, to add their expertise and their support to the mix. We also have a library of policies that we have gathered for the cohorts. These are the policies that the TLE Seal recipients have made publicly available, and so we've gathered them up in a library for the cohorts, so you have some models to work off of. As well as COSN has a fantastic online network that is open to COSN members. However, we have a privacy community within the network that's open to members and non-members who are interested in going through the TLE Seal program. And for those of you who are interested in joining one of the cohorts that's there on the slide here, or if you and your district colleagues would like to start a cohort in your state, please do reach out to me. You'll have my contact information at the end, and we can get you connected with your state cohort or help you with guidance to get a cohort started. And you will see on trustedlearning.org, there is a guide for getting starting a state cohort. However, to answer the question about California, we do have one in Southern California already, so please do reach out to me and we will get you connected there. So really what we've tried to do is create an environment where you are able to work and support each other, and we are able to support you at scale across these cohorts. And Brian or Serena, I don't know if you've acted as a cohort mentor yet. I know, Brian, it's something we've discussed. Can you tell me about your thoughts about state cohorts and kind of the benefits of working together to work through this risk mitigation?
So Derek Johnson here, my Chief Information or Director of Information Security is here too. And we haven't formally helped anyone. We have definitely participated in groups and have been, have shared information. I've presented at a number of conferences with you, Lynette, as well, and talked about what we've done and informally helped people. And if anybody's aware of the IMS Global Association, we work with them very closely, and it's the same kind of thing where we share information, and certainly data security and privacy comes up in that context as well. So we're totally open to helping. We do it in other contexts, and so just let us know what we can do.
That's great, and we do have interest in Georgia in a cohort, so we may be calling on you soon. And Brian, I know we've discussed some mentorship, and you've done a good deal of informal mentorship in your area as well. How's that experience been?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. It's been really great. And I already mentioned on the call a moment ago, I'm a huge proponent and fan of any sort of information sharing, consolidation of resources. Our local COSN chapter of Calais here in Colorado is a great opportunity for various leaders within our districts to get together and talk about what we're doing, especially around the state law and things of that nature. And so anytime Lynette has reached out to us around, a potential mentorship opportunity with another district, or even just answering some questions about someone who might be considering doing the TLE Seal application, and we are more than happy to have that discussion. And we really try to prioritize making everything, publicly available and easy to access, as hopefully you all found our academic technology menu, just to try to help people along. So, that's definitely something that I think really can continue to come from this. The more folks do the TLE Seal, the more it gains that national recognition. the more robust and expansive a conversation we could potentially all have around that information sharing. One of the things that when I first stepped into this role really surprised me was I kind of had this fear, I suppose, that maybe we were behind the curve or that I was going to have to do a lot of work, catching up to whatever other districts were doing around the nation. And I very rapidly realized that we're all struggling with many of the exact same challenges, and that if we sit there in an isolated vacuum and kind of try to do that work ourselves, we're all going to be, essentially recreating the wheel. Why not get together, share those resources, work on it all together, and really be able to present a united front around here's best practice in education around data privacy.
Fantastic. And I want to make sure that everyone here has an opportunity to see the other privacy resources that COSIN makes available. So there are resources at trustedlearning.org, but also at cosin.org/privacy. We have a variety of fundamental privacy resources available, starting with the flagship Protecting Privacy and Connected Learning Toolkit. These resources are free. It's great, solid, reputable information to help you build and improve on the fundamentals and really execute on some of the privacy requirements. So I strongly encourage everyone to go and download these resources if you have not already. There is a specific resource for leadership that you might share with your leadership. There's an infographic to help start the conversation in your community about the positive uses of data, as well as some fantastic guidance on navigating the laws and working with technology providers, as well as working through the TLE Seal program. I mentioned earlier the idea of doing a TLE self-assessment. I know of some districts where the technology team has done the assessment, and then they've also passed that assessment on to their leadership team to do it, and use that as a conversation starter. So for those of you struggling to figure out how do we best engage with leadership, that might be an interesting exercise to walk through. So before we conclude today, I wanted to ask Serena and Brian if you have any closing thoughts or maybe any suggestions for our listeners here about how they might go about getting started in the program or improving on their existing privacy practices.
So I would say network with peers, with people that are going through the process or already gone through it, and looking at the questions. The way we did it is we first downloaded the questions and we did a self-assessment, and we looked at where we need to improve. We were already on a trajectory to improve, as I said, because we were rolling out so much technology. But having the guideline of the TLE questions, do a self-assessment, get help and support in how to address some of these challenges. I totally agree with what Brian is saying. Whether you're large, small, wealthy or struggling financially, we're experiencing a lot of the same pains, and some of us have already thought these through. So if you're a district that has fewer resources, the districts that have more resources are usually more than willing to share and assist. There's state cohorts, like you were saying, Lynette, that can advise as well. But don't try to boil the ocean. Start small. Find a few things. Build momentum. Build that change management mindset, and show some results, and then build upon that. Yeah, get some win-wins between the district office and the school if you have a larger district, so that the schools can see how much the district is actually trying to help, and work together on that. So.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I would definitely just echo Serena there, in terms of picking a few things and just getting started. If you try to view the entire thing, holistically at first, it could definitely be very challenging, especially if for districts that maybe haven't done as much in this space. And so what I would just encourage is that, even if you're in a state that doesn't have a new data privacy law that's been passed or something like that, it's most likely that that's coming. You know, a lot of states are looking at this, especially with FERPA being increasingly outdated in some areas. You know, states are really taking initiative and taking action, which means it will likely be coming kind of all across the board. And so my advice would be, you know, try to just be proactive in terms of, you know, assessing and analyzing the various risks that could be posed to your district and your students, and trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to solve for, whether there's a law or not. You know, start that work, and then that's kind of how it worked out in our case. When the state law did pass, there was a lot of alignment with work that we were already doing, and now what that new requirement was. And I think the final piece that I'll just add on that note in terms of getting started is, I would just say, you know, don't underestimate the value of partnerships with your parents and your communities within the district. I think a lot of times the narrative gets framed as sort of like the school district versus the parents when it comes to student data privacy, and I just don't think that that's accurate. I think it couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, in the instances where we've really worked hard to partner with our parents as advocates for their students, you know, security and data privacy, have been the areas where we've had the most growth and success. And so, you know, any opportunity that you can have to do outreach with your community and the families of students at your schools, you know, definitely do so. Ask them what they want to see. Ask them what their concerns are, because they definitely have them, and it's better that they have that conversation with you than, you know, working through other channels that could be detrimental for all involved.
Thank you so much. That's great advice. Before we wrap, I want to make sure that we've answered all your questions. So if there are any final questions, please do feel free to post them in the chat. Also take a note of the upcoming COSIN webinars and the facilitated online training courses that we have going. Lots of great work and opportunities coming up from COSIN, including the COSIN conference in Portland. I hope to see many of you there. I want to thank Serena, Brian, our webinar sponsors, for all the great work, great advice. Thank you all for attending and for listening. And my contact information is there. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to help you further. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thanks, Lynette, and everyone.